Nobody is paying attention to the Pittsburgh Pirates tonight because they're probably waiting on the Steelers' first round pick. Not us, though. We're here. We're going to talk Pirates. I'm here with at Pirate Takes, my friend Scott. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. We're watching the game as we record. It's Thursday night. We saw Gorski make his debut with a home run in his first at bat, showing some of that power that we've been promised. And the Pirates had a much needed road trip to the West Coast after getting swept by the Guardians.
Yeah, I mean, a much needed. I mean, I think might be the understatement because, I mean, I was at the game on Friday and then especially on Saturday, a sold out crowd, a decent amount of Guardians fans, but, a lot of Pirates fans as well, disgruntled Pirates fans. I mean, I'll touch on that just for a second. I did scold some younger Pirates fans. When they started screaming "sell the team" behind me after Paul Skeens had given up a home run to only, I think it was 2-0 at that point in time. And I just basically told them, I said, I understand the frustration. And I feel like Kutch kind of said the same thing. Like, I understand, like, he's been here forever. I've been a Pirates fan forever. So I understand that angst and frustration. But there is like a time and a place. Like, you're not chanting "sell the team" at your superstar. That's one thing that I just really would not stand for. If Jack Sawinski on Friday night, he went down looking, I believe, for like the third time. I like Jack, and I don't want them to yell it at any fan, any fan to yell at any player. But if you're going to do it, I mean, that would be more of the opportune time to do it. Caleb Ferguson
Yeah.
gives up a walk and they start chanting it again. And I was just like, I've had enough of this. Like, I understand the sentiment. And I just basically told them and I said, I've wanted this man to sell the team from the moment he bought it outside of 3 years. Like, I get that, but he's not selling it. Like, it's to me, it's just like, at this point in time, you did your stuff on opening day. Bob Nutting was there. I know Bob Nutting was there on Saturday because he drove past and is going to give everybody the bobbleheads now, including, us who waited outside for like 2.5 hours to get it, but everybody's going to get it now. They should have all gotten it to begin with. But that was like more of the time and place to do that. I mean, you're not doing it to Paul Skeens. You're not doing it to Caleb Ferguson, who I believe up until that point in time had given up like one earned run and has been doing his job very well. I get the frustration, but honestly, there's a time and place. But like you said, a much needed, you know, swing where you probably have Pirates fans that don't get to see the team very often or just kind of excited to put on their black and gold and, go sit in the stands and watch their team. And of course, they're winning now too, so that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, that was just kind of my feeling. And I hate that every single time I love to talk about baseball, that I have to talk about something that is completely not baseball related on every single podcast. But I mean, I just had to get that off my chest because I had messaged you about it, and I was just like morons is what I called them. Just because like that, don't do that like
Yeah.
to certain players, and don't really do it to the players in general or reactions to the players.
Right. Because what's the message? You're saying sell the team because you're too cheap to get good players. That's the sentiment. And so when it's you're saying that to Paul Skeens, it just doesn't make sense. And like you said, you don't want to say it to any player because it's not the player's fault. They're just kind of playing the hand that they're dealt. But yeah, it's not needed. And then they go out to the West Coast. The pressure is off. They don't have to worry about hearing those chants anytime some kind of error is made or whatever. They know that they're in enemy territory to begin with. And you're right. Yeah, these California fans are going to be excited to see him because they only see him every other year now with the balanced schedule. They're catching the Angels at the right time. It seems like they're positioned right now for the sweep. Knock on wood. And then maybe catching the Dodgers, who are coming off a rough series against the Cubs. If you can win all three against the Angels and even take one against the Dodgers, that could be a momentum swing that this team desperately needs.
Yeah, because we talk about the schedule, and I think that we did last week as well. Of it's really not getting any easier. Uh, Pirates usually don't travel well out to the West Coast, so that was kind of a piece of it. And obviously, playing the Dodgers, who are taking some injuries themselves. I think I just saw that Blake Snell was shut down, so
Yeah.
that's difficult for them. It's difficult for anybody who has him in fantasy baseball or anything. But yeah, I mean, the Angels are one of those teams we were talking about it before the show where they do spend the money. It's just it never seems to be spent in the right place. They have some exciting young players, but at this point in time, I question myself as to, would I rather be cheering for the Pirates or being a fan of the Angels? And I mean, to me, that would kind of be a toss up. Obviously, I'd, with the history and everything, lean towards the Pirates just because they are my favorite team. But yeah, it's definitely a weird thing to hear when you're at a game and then to go out there and hopefully taking some of that off. The big thing for me, especially in this game tonight, and even the game that I was at on Friday, is just O'Neill Cruz moving him up to the leadoff spot. That was something we saw kind of at the beginning of his career. At that point in time, it was kind of saying that he would get more at bats just because to get him going, different types of stuff like that. But he feels like pretty comfortable, in that spot. A lot of people might say you're, wasting the bat because, you're getting these leadoff home runs. They're all solo home runs. But for a while there, it was like, okay, you got to take your runs where you can get them because you're not going to get them. But I also think that like hitting begets hitting. And if you get a guy that gets out there, for the most part, I mean, obviously his solo home run against Trevor Williams didn't do that because then we sat there and waited for offense to come around. But, if it's like, okay, we can get to this guy, okay, let's get to this guy. And that has kind of, been happening a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he only leads off once, right? So then you have an opportunity as you go through the lineup multiple times. That's part of why IKF has been a fixture at um, at 9 is in theory to get him on base for Cruz. And you see a team like Philadelphia that leads off a lot of times with a not your prototypical leadoff hitter with Kyle Schwarber, and maybe ambush the other team with a leadoff home run, but at least Cruz has the talent and the speed to, if and we've seen it quite a bit this season. If he does just get a single, he can turn it into a double with pretty regular um, success, not being caught for quite a while. As well, that was a rough play by Reynolds diving and missing, but who's been pretty steady back in the outfield now. I know that that's another talking point throughout the course of the week has been Andrew McCutcheon talking about his playing time and his ability to play in the field more. I think that we have heard over the last couple of years that he's almost exclusively a DH, but he's saying all the right things of if the team needs me to play more outfield, I can play more outfield. And I think he essentially said, play me until I tell you I can't go.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna give my all until there's nothing left to give. It's kind of like cart me off the field, if need be, and that's kind of what you want to hear. And it's a guy who is producing, has produced over the past few years. I mean, I know that I don't put him down for it. I put like almost the team down for it. Well, people will say, well, he's your second or he's your third best hitter, and he needs to be in there, and a piece of that has almost been, he shouldn't be your second or third best hitter. You need better hitters than that. And it's not a knock on Andrew McCutcheon because he's been a very, strong contributor to the baseball club. But yeah, I mean, if he's gonna be able to play out there, you want him to be out there. It's just, I mean, it's weird because it was at the time where Reynolds is finally heating up and Reynolds gets hot. The O'Neill Cruz thing and him needing a break, I think, is like maybe even just like more the bigger piece of that for me. But until you have Gorski up here now, you don't really have a legitimate backup center fielder. I mean, Jack can can field the position. And, other fans will probably say, well, Brian Reynolds was a center fielder and, he played pretty well out there. Well, that was like a few years ago. And
Yeah.
he didn't play great in center field. And that's why he got moved to left field. And then he got moved off of left field because his defense wasn't great out there and trying to like shorten, what he has to cover in right field. So, yeah, I mean, you didn't really have that. But, yeah, I mean, Ono Cruz, you want to keep his bat in the lineup. But, I mean, I think that there's, a little bit of frustration there because who do you replace him with? Jack Sawinski, who is striking out at, I believe it was upwards of almost 50% of the time because when we were at the game on Friday, my buddy kind of looked at me and he goes, what's the chance that Sawinski strikes out here? And I basically said, flip a coin because that's like how close it is to, a 50-50 chance of that happening. Yeah. But Andrew, I definitely sense like that there's something like going on, like a rumble in the belly. And I don't know if it's like realizing his own mortality within baseball, whatever it may be, but he's talking to the media differently than he's ever really talked to them before. I mean, I know he's clapped back on social media before, but I mean, he's any like it seems like negative comment or anything that's a little bit even out of turn. It's just that he's giving that out there. But I mean, that's showing emotion and it's showing that he wants to be out there. And as long as he's backing it up on the field, I don't really see anything wrong with it. I actually kind of enjoy it from him because it's pretty freaking hysterical the way that he just like calls people out because he's been doing this for so long. He's been doing it for so well, and he's climbing the charts within, many of the, the Pirates record books with his home runs, with his hits, his at bats, everything. Yeah, I mean, I like to see that from Andrew McCutchen.
Yeah, and it really makes the team better if he's playing in the field because he knows his limitations. He knows, you know, when to take a ball on a hop and when he can dive for it. Has the experience to take those little shortcuts that experience gives you, but then also it allows him to stay in the lineup. And then you give Cruz a day off out of the field and he can DH. Opens up that DH position because that's something we said in the off season was you're hoping that somebody steps up and makes his bat obsolete. Well, part of that is because he wasn't defensively versatile. So by allowing him to play the field a little bit more and open up that DH spot, really makes the team more well rounded.
Yeah, and the one thing I want to go back to what you said there, Scott, it kind of clicked in my head is that having IKF who kind of hits for average, doesn't hit for a ton of power, gets on base. I mean, I think that we had even talked about when they were really struggling at that leadoff spot that he could possibly be an option there just because, like I said, he does get on base and that's what you want from your leadoff hitter. But somebody had written, and I'm going to have to go back. I have it bookmarked here and I couldn't find it on my phone super quick, but there's something that's going to be coming out here as to why the seventh hitter in the lineup is actually where you should put your worst hitter. And you wouldn't think about it that way because you always had the pitcher, especially in the National League, in that ninth spot. And the times that Joe Madden would come out and put the pitcher at the eighth spot and ninth, everybody would just kind of like raise their hands and go, whoo, like this guy's like kind of thinking out of the box. But it was more of the benefit of, I mean, turning the lineup around. I mean, that's something that's been in baseball for years is like, okay, I can remember like even in Little League or something, it's like, okay, let's put somebody out there that can turn this lineup around and get it back up to, your leadoff hitter and then the heart of your lineup and different stuff like that. So, I mean, that's something that I really wouldn't mess with. And I'm really interested. When I do read it, when I go back to the bookmark and find out who said that, but they said they were going to have some stuff, some analytical stuff that's coming out here very shortly on that. And I'm really interested to read that just because it would definitely go against the mindset of many baseball fans that it's just like, okay, you put your weakest hitter ninth, but if you have this new mentality, like you said, having like a Schwarber up there leading off, a Cruz up there leading off, that you wouldn't want to have your worst hitter there. You would want to have somebody who gets on base as almost like a second leadoff hitter. They're not going to get as many plate appearances as everybody else, but it's somebody that's going to make the most of those minimal plate appearances.
And you get the best of both worlds there because your Cruz is getting more at bats because he's batting leadoff, and that's the reason that you do that. It's the reason that Brian Reynolds has batted second for such a long time because he increased at bats over the course of the season between just second and third. But if that first time through the lineup you have it set up that way, but then the second time through the lineup, if IKF is getting on base, hitting singles or doubles or whatever he does. Then you essentially make Cruz a number two hitter and Brian Reynolds a number three hitter. So by loading the most bottom part of your lineup with guys that can get on base, you're increasing RBI opportunities for guys that are in leadoff and second and then position third and so on and so forth. I think it's smart. And I saw the same kind of tweet that you saw that I was going through to see if he had the rationale, and everything in the comments was like, oh, explain it. And he's like, I've done that. Go back and search my tweets. So I didn't have time to do that before the show, but I am very interested as well.
Yeah, and like I was saying, we were talking about before the show, and I even put it like a little bit in the show notes, was like, is this the Pirates' best lineup right now as it could be constructed? Just because, I mean, you're lengthening the lineup a little bit. I mean, obviously, if guys are hitting, it's going to look like the best lineup. It's the same thing as, you can make the manager look smart if, the bullpen performs. If he pulls the right string, which is what everybody always says, but it's just more of like, okay, does this guy have it tonight? Is this guy on? Going back to the game that I was at, I mean, Caleb Ferguson had pitched so well outside of giving up one run. And when he came in, I mean, he bounced like 2 or 3 balls in and just like really didn't have his best stuff. More than likely, 9 times out of 10, you would say, oh, yeah, Shelton pulled the right string. But then this time it's like, oh, why did he bring this bum in? Well, no, I mean, that's like kind of a piece of it. And knowing what guys are hot and what guys aren't, can also be a piece of it. But then sometimes, a bullpen guy, they'll just have a rough outing. It's not like you're stringing together like a bunch of, bad outings like, David Bednar was last year, and you continue to put him out there. Like, I can put that on Shelton. But if a guy comes out, like, if you come out and like Dennis Santana gets 3 outs but gives up the winning run, in extra innings, it's like, well, did he pull the wrong string? Well, no, he pulled the right thing, and the guy gets the loss, and people complain about the Manfred runner or whatever. But I mean, those are the types of little things there that it's just like, it's such a fine line of, pulling the right string and, looking like a bozo as the manager. But, and in mentioning David Bednar, looked really good in his last outing. I'm not going to say I know he got the lines that you would probably want in his first 2 outings. The one not last night, but the previous night, and Manuel Valdez kind of, saved him a little bit by making a little bit of a play. It wasn't a super sharp hit ball, but, and then, IKF ranging over to the side and making another little bit of a play that I think in other years, especially last year, that probably would have been, a double down the line and a bloop single, and we'd be, screaming our heads off. But, Bednar definitely looked more like himself. That fastball that sits right at the top of the zone probably isn't a strike, but looks like a strike, playing off of the curveball that's more at the bottom of the zone and isn't hanging up towards the middle. I mean, that can only be good for the Pirates to have more options. I hate to even, I know a lot of people are going to have the conversation about, when does he get the closer roll back? Everybody knows how I feel about the closer. Play the hot hand.
Yep.
But there's going to be high leverage situations throughout the game. If he can fit into one of those, I mean, that's going to be just as important as finishing a game in the 9th. And I think it gives him a little bit more of an opportunity, because if you set a closer, there's only going to be so many closing opportunities. And if you have to pitch a guy who hasn't pitched in about, a week in a high leverage spot, that's also doing him a disservice. You can't let him go for a week without pitching, but you may not have close games. So you got to throw him in there in a little bit of a mop up duty and different stuff like that. It's just like, well, like I said, putting him in earlier in the game when it would be high leverage to me is kind of just as important, because if you don't get to that point, and in the ninth inning, then what is the point of the closer anyway? So I hope that they kind of keep on doing that, let him play back into that. But I know that closers are cool and play renegade and all that kind of stuff and
Right.
everything. But
Right.
to me, it's just like you got to do what's like most successful for the team. And obviously, there's guys that can close, a Baraki, Santana. Unfortunately, like Justin Lawrence going to the IL, we had mentioned as one of those guys. But
Yeah.
I feel like there's enough arms in there that you can just kind of play guys, matchup wise, leverage wise, whatever it may be, and still be, fairly successful.
Yeah. Sometimes the most important inning, as far as matchups go, is in the seventh or the eighth, and to have the flexibility to be able to put somebody like a Bednar in that position. I mean, that's what Moretta was always really good at, and it's a shame that he got hurt. But coming into those situations where you really need the other team shut down this inning, a lot of his cases there were runners on. But yeah, Santana has pitched very well. I think he's deserved the opportunity for the ninth. Um, and I think that going forward, we probably will see that. And I like the idea of playing the matchups, not having a dedicated closer, which flies in the face of what's going on in baseball. But that's because guys are getting paid to be closers. And so, and you talked about Shelton pulling the right strings. I mean, are we seeing that it's finally time to? We've been saying for weeks that pull Majinski out of the rotation. They gave him a 3-run lead tonight, and he blew it in one inning. And so, like you were just saying before we got on, I think that he maintains and he looks good, but then he'll just implode in an inning, and it happens almost out of nowhere. And so, with the depth of pitching that this team and this organization has, why are we having a guy who could be an elite bullpen arm and could be into that closer mix, as we've been saying since the offseason, the beginning of the offseason? He could really factor into the back of the bullpen and be very successful and make this team better and make the rotation stronger, addition by subtraction in the rotation, and in the bullpen, addition by addition. But making it a better team, and that's where Shelton needs to make the right moves. And he, just like we see sometimes with the bullpen, sometimes he just waits that much too long to make that move. And how many times have we seen him leave a pitcher in just one batter too long? Everybody even on the broadcast, and everybody sitting at home, and everybody on Twitter is saying, "Okay, this guy's done." You leave it in for one more batter, and that's where things blow up. He just needs to be more decisive and trust his gut, and let's make a move.
Yeah, and that was the thing that we were talking about during the last show, and I knew that I was going to go see Majinski pitch, and he had made it through, the order the first time. He gave up a solo home run to Bo Naylor, first time seeing him. But as the next round of guys came up to see him the second time, it was just like single, double, single. I mean, he was just getting hard, getting hit like crazy. And like you said, he gets up to like, we were talking about it as we were about to start the show. We're like, okay, he's at 32 pitches. Like, how much longer are they going to let him go? And what's that going to happen? And I mean, everything could have a built-in excuse. If Brian Reynolds doesn't let that ball go past him, then but that guy is probably still getting on because Reynolds probably should have held up and he'd be on, and then he gave up the hard contact, and I think it was only a matter of time that he was going to give up a home run in this game. But he's a guy that for those small little glimpses, and I don't mind. I know a lot of people don't like the opener. I don't mind the opener because it's almost like putting the closer at the beginning of the game. And it's like, okay, let's shut them down through the beginning here and then give them a different look. It could run into like kind of being a bullpen game because the most you would be getting out of that guy is, 3 innings for the most part of good baseball. Most of the time, two. But yeah, I mean, but it would give some flexibility if you need, an extra day off for guys just because you're getting to it starts to get warmer out. It's getting hot. You got a lot of games in a row, not a lot of off days, and you want to give, your starters a little bit of a breather. It doesn't mean that you can't, pitch him as that opener and be successful in that while, using him in the seventh, eighth, or ninth inning for games in between that, because now it's just almost like you're pitching him and you're trying to pitch him like starter length of like 65, 70 pitches. And then he does have that lull in between. Whereas if you gave him those 30 pitches, you could pitch him a few days later and pitch him in a different situation. So to me, like that would be a better use of that. We're seeing, Mike Burrows getting called up. Mike Burrows he's stretched out. Is he like going to be that starter? Are they saying, okay, well, we've given this to Majinski? I know that he said, before the game in Shelton that he's going to be in the bullpen for right now. But he's also a guy that could work himself into the starter role. I know everybody wants the sexy call up of, a Bubba Chandler and different things like that. And we will see that at some point in time. For me, this is just kind of like, Bubba's innings managed a little bit like we've talked about before, trying to, get him to the end of the season and filling it in this way. But yeah, to me, I've seen enough of Majinski as a starter. It's not something that you completely, throw away and shelf forever. But at least right now, if you're calling up another guy who pretty much is like another Majinski as far as like how deep he can go into games and different stuff like that with his pitch count. I'm not saying that, Burrows is going to be, hit hard the second time through the lineup, but just pitch wise, you have two guys like that. To me, it would just make more sense to kind of flip flop that for now. Majinski to the bullpen can give him more opportunities throughout the week and kind of play those guys off of each other. Like we're talking about playing a hot hand. It's just like, okay, what guy is looking the best and giving that a little bit more of a run because Majinski's, I hate to talk about a live game right now, but he's still in the game right now doing kind of okay. But to me, it's just like you're automatically, most times it's like, here's giving up like 3 or 4 runs to kind of see how deep he can get into games. I feel like that he's always going to implode if you let him go. And this is with an Angels lineup that, hasn't hit the ball that well during the series. And all of a sudden now it's just like, there goes the lead.
Right. Yeah, Logan O'Hoppe comes up and puts one over the fence and, makes the difference there. But, I just think that the experiment is over. He can be a starter if he wants to do the Clay Holmes thing, and when he goes somewhere else, more power to him. That's fine. But as far as what's best for this team right now, organizationally they have enough pitching depth to get somebody else to be in the rotation, and to let him just be what's a more natural fit, and that is back of the bullpen.
And speaking of, what's best for this team right now is, we're calling up Gorski, and I know there was people out there like he can play every outfield position, which gives him that flexibility. I did like to see that they put him into that first base slot. We've talked about this is that, Jared Triolo can play first base. He has played first base, and played it well just because he's good defensively. He picked up the position, but that kind of takes away from what makes Jared Triolo what he is, which is a defensive specialist. Yes, you would hope the bat would come around more, but it's good to give, Brian Hayes a day off, playing some shortstop, using him as the right-handed option at second base. He could even play some outfield. We saw a little bit, for at least an inning or so last year. So there is that type of stuff in there, and Gorski gives you that flexibility. But from first base, you have, Emmanuel Valdez, who has a little bit of pop. Now you have Gorski, who has a little bit of pop. And I think that you can kind of like rig together a little bit of a a nice first base platoon until Horwitz comes back. Obviously, he's down there. He did some live, batting practice with a guy you mentioned before in Dowry Moretta. So he will be back eventually. But then, even at that, I mean, he's going to need some days off, and don't know what's going on with Endy. You don't really have that, right-handed option. I guess at that point in time, you could play, Triolo over there for a day. But I mean, you also could keep Gorski up here if he's hitting well, if he is that a little bit of a spark, and play him in some of those outfield positions. And I mean, I know that like we talked about Billy Cook a lot in spring training as, being the best outfielder for the Pirates, but I mean, Gorski's not too shabby himself out there.
Right. Yeah, and you're getting to the point where some more decisions are going to have to be made. These guys are going to have to show up, and they're going to have to prove themselves. They're going to have to play on the team. It's not, and that was the other thing about the Shelton thing, is that if they were to fire Shelton, it shows that there's accountability for what's happening on the field, and losing has consequences. It's like that with the players. You're going to have to play your way onto the team because it's not 2020, 2021, where it doesn't matter because we're going to lose anyway. This is a time where we need to be winning. And so when Endy comes back, which I think I saw that he's been cleared for baseball activities, and I saw a clip on social media today, and I got really excited because it was a double, but then it was Eddie. It was Eddie, not Endy. So I was like, oh wait, he didn't start a rehab yet. One of those guys is gonna have to change their name. I think it's gonna get too confusing. But yeah, it's gonna be some decisions that need to be made, and where does Endy fit in this? Does Henry go back down? It seems like he was taking some steps forward with his contact. A lot of it was pop ups, but he's making more contact. You're gonna have Endy. He's gonna have to find a spot somewhere as a catcher or first base or maybe some second. We haven't seen him in the major leagues at second, but in the lower minor leagues he played quite a bit of that. So he has the flexibility to do it. It's just a wait and see kind of thing, I suppose.
Yeah, and if he starts to hit, I mean, if Gorski would hit, I think that would probably spell the end for Alexander Canario. I think that might be like the swan song for him. I know a lot of people would want it to be, the swan song for Tommy Pham. Pham, I don't know. I know that he does some crazy stuff. He does goofy stuff. Obviously, he makes the highlight reels for making gestures to fans. I think he said something inappropriate to fans during spring training. I think they might have been playing the Yankees or something,
Yankees.
and made some comments to them. But the one thing I will say about Tommy Pham, and I think it was Jim Rosati, Northside Notch, that kind of put something out there that at that point in time that Tommy Pham had like 6 defensive runs saved. Like he wasn't doing it with the bat, but he's absolutely been doing it in the field. And to me, that's fine because that would basically mean that he would play the position that he probably should be playing on a competitive team, which would be a defensive replacement in the later innings. And he's also shown some clutch hitting in those later innings. So if he would be a guy that would be in there, I mean, even he got a broken bat single. I mean, he's not an everyday player at this point in time in his career, was kind of signed as an everyday player with maybe the hopes and dreams that, fingers crossed, Sawinski would, kind of take over that position to a degree. But yeah, I mean, that's what you want him to be. And if it's Matt Gorski that takes it over, great. Billy Cook, he's a slow starter. I looked up his stats. He's got a slow start going now again. Usually in the first month of the season, and even last season, before the Pirates traded for him, basically it's like the first month of the season, he's got an OPS of below 600, right around 500 sometimes. And then as it starts to heat up, he starts to heat up, kind of tells you, kind of like a Brian Reynolds type thing. So, obviously not writing him off yet at this point in time, but that would be kind of the goal with Pham, is that he would be that veteran, defensive replacement that, he does put his body on the line, made a catch where stole a home run when Baraki, kind of left one up there. So, I mean, that would be the ideal thing. It would be the kind of the same thing with Adam Frazier. Adam Frazier's making a lot of these like nice little defensive plays, even early on in the season, throwing guys out at home. He turns a quick double play. His hands are pretty good. But yeah, that would be his role. It's just kind of like, okay, and Manuel, like second base is your natural position with Nikki G out, and you're showing some pop, but our first baseman's out right now, so you got to play there. But you would bring kind of like the Frazier in for that. So that's like those bench roles. Like those are the roles that they should be taking on. But I mean, right now they're starters. I think they're going to be starters for at least a little bit here. But maybe once Horowitz comes back and there's not so many spots in the lineup, and obviously that's going to be a lot of like, if this guy continues to hit, if that guy continues to hit, they would be moved out of that and possibly traded at some point in time. Because, I mean, we've seen that there is some value. I mean, what was it? Draw Dyson. We traded, even though it was for, international bonus pool space or whatever it may be. But there is still some value, in that type of stuff. And it kind of seems like competitive teams like to have Tommy Pham on there. So, I mean, it's almost taking the good with the bad with him. It's like he's going to make some clutch hits. He's going to make some fans mad. And he's going to play good defense right now. So, I mean, I'll kind of take that from him.
That's what makes him sought after, and that's what made him a target the last few years and end up on playoff teams.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue with too much of that. And I mean, I think that, I don't know, like I said, if you could just get them in bench roles, if you could get some of these guys hitting and have one of these guys kind of come out of nowhere, because it's like what we've talked about. And I know you mentioned, during the off season is like, you need like that Max Muncy or somebody that you just like, or an older vet. I mean, we mentioned like a Josh Harrison, a guy that wasn't really a highly touted prospect, but was a hard worker and worked himself in an everyday role and became, more than an everyday player, became a little bit of a spark plug. So, and if it's Gorski, if it's Cook, if whoever it may be, the Pirates lineup desperately needs that.